welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I'm your host, Karen E. Osborne, and I am so glad you're here. Glad that you've been back. We have a wonderful, lively, vivacious guest today. Her name is Kasey Rogers. Hey, Kasey.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
I am awesome. I can't wait for everybody to meet you. I'm just going to read a little bit about you. So get ready to blush. Okay. So Kasey spent her earlier career working in commercial film industry in New York City by day and writing a musical in between film projects. We have to hear all about this. After the birth of her twins, she switched gears to follow another passion, cooking. Now, those two things naturally follow. I'm writing a film and now I'm cooking. Yes. And that led her and her late husband to turn a vacation property in Alexandria, Ontario, into a restaurant. So now she's a restaurateur. For several years, she owned and operated the Two Beans Cafe and Tea Room before moving back to the US. Since then, she has written the memoir, Our Better Selves, From Secrets and Lies to Healing and Forgiveness. I just love the title of that. That is so perfect. And a work of literary fiction, The Color of Frost, which is another really cool title. And I hope you have copies of your books with you.
I don't have them with me right now, but you can find them on my website.
All right, we're going to send you to our website.
Okay.
Along with writing, Kasey is an outspoken advocate for women and speaks about the connection between domestic and financial abuse. And you can learn more about I Know Why She Stayed initiative on her website, which is kaseyrogers.com. I am just so excited to have you for this conversation because you just are such an interesting person doing so many interesting things in your life. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's good. So like me, you moved from victim to survivor to thriver.
hmm
And not everybody gets to that point, in their journey. Some people stay victim forever. Some people, stay survivor, and life is
hmm
still really hard. So tell me how you were able to turn your life around, and what were some of those lessons learned?
That is such a brilliant question and really addresses so much of what I'm all about. Um, I didn't realize that I was a victim
Hmm.
until I started writing about the experience. And what happened in my situation was I was married for 12 years before we had children. And because of a very unusual lifestyle, I worked in New York City, but I lived 2.5 hours away. So I commuted into work every single day. And so I kind of had like a honeymoon kind of life, marriage where I really only saw my husband for the most part on the weekends. And it was all going out to dinner and, doing vacation things and buying antiques for our house and renovating and it just this kind of like in a bubble kind of existence.
Hmm.
As I was working on the musical and got really, really far with it in New York City. We were scheduled for production. And then a series of events happened that kind of put the project on hold. And I was approaching my 40s, and I was like, if I'm going to do this, if we're going to have a family, it might be a nice time to start now. So I was very, very fortunate and I got pregnant with twins when I was 41 years of age. But that also necessitated me to take it a little easier. And after the birth of the twins, I found it very, very difficult to continue with working when I was like, working so far away from them.
Yeah,
And,
2.5 hours. Yeah.
and my husband at the time, he was like a writer, very talented man. He was also working about an hour away from home. And
Mm.
one day I came home from work and my son was sick. And I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this anymore. They were almost two. I was missing out on their childhood. They were constantly sick from daycare. So I quit my job and I got, a couple part-time jobs, but I wasn't making nearly the amount of money that I was making. And that changed the dynamic of my relationship with my
Yeah,
husband.
right. Mm.
I was no longer the breadwinner. My husband always had the benefit of, like, he was a freelancer for many, many years. So he could work on a project for 2, 3 months. And most of the money that he made went back into his business or into his personal projects. And I kept us afloat because I was the one that had the benefits and I had the steady job and I was making lots of money. So once that no longer existed, I was asked to provide receipts all of a sudden for groceries. Or there were questions all the time about like anything that I wanted to purchase. And I never had those expectations when he was, like at
Yeah.
home. And so things kind of started going south really quickly. But now I didn't have a full-time job. We had spent a lot of money on fertility and I didn't have a bank account that I could rely on. And I
Mm.
thought about leaving the marriage multiple times, but then when my kids were about 6 or almost 7, um, he lost his job due to no fault of his own. And we decided to make a really, really big change in our life. That's when we decided to buy a vacation property up in Canada. And I thought, this is what our relationship lacks. He's going in one direction, I'm going in the other direction. We need to come together and work as a team again.
Have a project. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was very optimistic that this would work. And, because I had experience in project management, even though I'd never owned a restaurant, because I was like a really great cook, I was able to start a business up there. And it was, we were up there for like less than 4 months. And we were going to open in a couple of months. It was like September. And all of a sudden, he announced that he had taken a job back in the States. So I was being left in a foreign country, raising twins that were 8 going on 9, and expected to run a new business by myself. And it wasn't until we had that distance between us that I realized that I was breathing again. I could be myself again. I wasn't constantly walking on eggshells. I wasn't constantly being gaslighted or told that I was inept or I was incompetent or, like all of the verbal abuse that, he was
Mm.
laying on me. Because the bottom line is that he resented the fact that he no longer had this lifestyle where he could do whatever he wanted. He could spend his days working on a play and then, he'd dabble in making, money on it. So there was a lot of resentment that built up. Long story short, the unfortunate thing is that he kind of forced my hand. I ended up having to move back to the States. And 6 months after I moved back there, I mean, I was ready to leave, but I had no money. And he was even worse in terms of like controlling constantly. It's like he would give me like $20 for gas and, expect me to, find a job with, no cell phone or no like house phone or whatever. He ruled over the roost. If I changed a piece of furniture, it became a federal crime. So he became very, very, very controlling. And so I attempted to leave a couple of times and that didn't work. for a host of reasons. And then about 6 months after I got back, we found out he was dying of cancer. And
Goodness.
yeah, so that in and of itself was just so traumatic because I had so many feelings that were mixed up in this failed marriage and being gaslighted and being verbally abused. And I didn't know what the term financial abuse was, but
Mm.
that's what I realized when I sat down and I started writing about my experience. I wrote a short story, and it was not about my marriage and the difficulties in the marriage. It was really a condemnation of the medical system in the US, because I strongly believe that one of the reasons why he died the way he did was because he was afraid to access healthcare. Because he knew, as a writer for the pharmaceutical industry, how many people go bankrupt because of medical debt. And also, even if you have a great medical plan, if you have $100,000 worth of medical bills, and you're only covered to 20%, you're still on the hook for $20,000. And he knew that. So by the time he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, it was just too late. It was too late. And for years and years and years, I really struggled to kind of separate and untangle all these feelings. But
Yeah, about the grief
yeah,
and then the anger at the medical system, but also recognizing that you'd been abused for years in your marriage. So what what are some of the lessons that you learned from that? Things that our audience might benefit from.
oh, I so love that question, because that's what my mission is. My mission in life right now is to really, really expose how insidious financial abuse is, and that domestic abuse and financial abuse go hand in hand. 99% of the cases of domestic abuse have an element of financial abuse, because it's a way for an individual to control somebody else. Like financial abuse can take many forms. Like it could be somebody calling up your workplace and jeopardizing your job. It could be preventing you from getting a job in the first place by limiting your access to transportation or childcare. It could be somebody that, literally hijacks your paycheck or ruins your credit. And in my particular case, a lot of those things did exist, but I didn't know what it was until I started doing this research. And when I wrote the book, I couldn't say abuse. I couldn't say that I was
Couldn't
abused.
name it.
No,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well, we had a dysfunctional marriage, or, oh, well, we just fought a lot, or he was a really great guy 80% of the time. It was just that 20%. Well, that 20% almost destroyed me. It destroyed my personality. It destroyed my belief in myself. It destroyed my belief in other people, because this was somebody
Yeah.
I was married to.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So, as women who, so is your hope as coming from the book, and this is Our Better Selves, right? This is the memoir, Our Better Selves, from Secrets and Lies to Healing and Forgiveness. Um, is your purpose to make sure that women see themselves, that they can recognize what is happening, and is there a message about how you heal, how you get through it?
I think my mission, I started an initiative called I Know Why She Stayed, because so many people condemn women that stay in bad relationships, and they don't understand things like trauma bond. They don't understand the trauma that women experience when they've been domestically abused. And I want people to understand that there is a reason why women stay in these relationships, but also I want them to see the connection between financial abuse and one other element that's really, really plagues our society is pay inequity. Because women are paid so much less than men, it basically is systemic financial abuse by the system because we earn on average $12,000 less annually. And that means that we don't have the access to resources that we should have just by virtue of the fact that we're women and we're working in a job that we're not getting paid equally. So that's what the initiative is about. And we're trying to, raise awareness and also to, raise support for these issues so that people understand the connection between these three things. And even my book, The Color of Frost, really connects a lot of these issues as well because the main character experiences financial abuse in her marriage, and it really puts her in a situation that she almost doesn't survive. So all of my work has basically started to intersect in
Yeah, I
some.
can see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love helping women. Like I love the fact that people would read the memoir and they would be like, they would recognize themselves and they would be like, I didn't realize that there were other people out there. I thought it was just me. I thought it was just something I had experienced. And now they can say, no, this is something that so many women go through. It's astounding how many women I've spoken to that have similar experiences. But again, I thought I was, all alone.
I
So,
saw this wonderful post on social media. I forget which of my many platforms I saw it on, but it said, when you say it out loud, you find out you have a community.
mhm.
I'm not saying it exactly, but the concept was by speaking up, you realize you're not alone. And not only are you not alone, but you have a community, you have a support group, you have places to turn. And when we keep it a secret,
Mhm.
then you're just out there with no support at all. So that is very, very beautiful. And the color of frost, um, when did that come out?
Last year in November of 2022. And it's a work I'm just really proud of because I was able to tackle a lot of the themes that I've experienced personally, but in a way that makes for for a very compelling story. And I kind of used the story of my main character, whose name is Nina DeMarco, to really touch upon the need for community, the need for diversity and inclusion. And because I know it's crazy, it's like the novel takes place in 1974 and it starts out with Nixon's resignation because
Oh,
there's so many elements in the book that are reflective of the time period that we're in right now. It's like it started out with a corrupt ex-president. There's inflation, there's wars, there's like riots in the street. That's when a couple years earlier Kent State happened. Women had just been given like abortion rights, or and there are just, but even at that point in time, if a woman walked into a bank and she wanted to get a credit card, she couldn't without a co-signer. If she wanted to get like a loan, she had to have like a man on the lease, or on the mortgage. And
wow.
yet, I mean, it seems like, oh my God, that must have been like back in like the 30s or 40s. No, that was 1974. And the story kind of is an arc about the way that women won their rights. And like there's multiple characters in different time periods. But again, it's like being able to weave all of these different themes that are so important to me as a person, about equal rights and about the need for community. It just, it just, again, I'm just really proud of it as a work.
Yeah. Isn't it so wonderful how writing um, lets us not just heal ourselves, it's so cathartic
Mhm.
writing it, but also it lets so many people out there know and believe and see. So that's very, very beautiful. Our show is What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? And so I can't let us wrap up without you sharing some books that you've read recently or
Mhm.
love that you'd like to recommend to our audience?
I was on vacation and I read a book, and I'm going to be, I'm terrible with names. It was called The Dictionary of Lost Words, and it was by a woman. I think her name is Pippa Williams, and it was such a lovely, lovely book. And it
Mm,
was all about this young girl that grew up at a time in the 1800s when they were putting the Oxford Dictionary together.
mm,
And they came across, like, whenever there was a word that really had, to do with almost exclusively women or women's issues, it was excluded. And so this
uh,
little girl starts collecting these words, and she puts a dictionary together later in life. And that's where the Dictionary of Lost Words comes from.
that's a beautiful concept. I mean, horrible, but
Still,
that's what I've just finished reading Lessons in Chemistry,
oh,
which isn't that an amazing book?
yeah.
And it made me, you and your books made me think of it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
such an amazing book. So they're in 60s, the things that but she had the strength and the courage, to speak up.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Now I know that you have intrigued our audience. I know they want to meet you, they want to follow you, they want to be able to read your books. So how can they find you?
The best way is to go to my website, because it has all of my information, including everything about the initiative. So it's just Kasey with a K, Kasey, Rogers without a D.com. And I love connecting and talking to people. I love, talking to people like you, because as a writer, it just it just makes me feel like what I'm doing is just, it's so much beyond myself. It's no
Yes.
longer about
Bigger
me.
purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope you're getting lots and lots of speaking engagements. I hope that people are inviting you into their homes, into their book clubs, into their synagogues, into their everything, so that you can share your journey and share your warmth and your encouragement. So thank you, Kasey, for being on my show. And I thank all of you for returning. I hope that you will follow Kasey, that you'll go to her website, find out more, buy her book. And I hope that you're already following me on Instagram and Twitter and my author page and my YouTube channel and my website. I'm Karen E. Osborne. Thank you, everybody, and see you next week on the next episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Have a great week, everybody.